Welcome to AO On Air. This is a podcast from ActiveOps, allowing us to present you topics ranging from operations management, leadership, technology, and new innovations. Check out all our episodes on YouTube channel AOTV or with your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple or Spotify. Now let's begin.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. You're watching another episode of AO On Air, which is a podcast from ActiveOps. Really excited about our guest here today. He has a lot of experience in the U.S. healthcare community, a lot of deep experience. So we're going to cover a bunch of topics, mainly about employee engagement, but really looking forward to it. Darren, welcome.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Great. Maybe start with just an intro.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me on today, and I'll go into hopefully a brief intro, but believe it or not, I've been at this for about 30 years now. So I've been in the health plan space ever since starting my career. I've been very fortunate to be primarily with two companies that are about 85 years old. So started out my career with a regional health plan serving about 1 million members in the Midwest, and really fortunate there to kind of break that into three areas. My first years with the plan, I was focusing on hospital reimbursement and contracting, which involved a lot of data-driven decisions, as well as interacting with hospital executives and contract negotiating and so forth. And that was a great foundation for the rest of my career, because I learned so much about the business and how everything worked, all the way from operations to again, provider reimbursement to benefit plan administration. From there, at the same company, I was able to kind of move into a medical economics and analytics role with the company, and was able to serve our healthcare management area. Learned a lot of things. Again, foundation being provider reimbursement and contracting, but got into a lot of the early stage quality reporting and analysis related to things like HEDIS and some of the Medicare stars. I don't think it was called that then, but some of that sort of reporting and analytics. And that was departmental for probably the middle part of my career, and really got a great opportunity at the end of that to create an enterprise data management and analytics area where we, from the ground up, built a award-winning enterprise data warehouse and the analytics that sat on top of that, and which really led me to my second company. 20 years with the original company, and I was given a golden opportunity to take what we had built inside of that company as far as an analytic product and consulting service to the commercial market. So after my time there, I was able to work with a new startup, which was founded by my original health plan, and for 5 years sold our platform to not only health plans, but provider organizations and so forth. It was a combination of claims as well as consumer data, and getting into a little bit of the EMR data as far as integrating that all together and making sense out of this complex healthcare landscape. So that was a great opportunity with a much smaller company. Went from a 1,200 person company to leading about 30, and being on the road from coast to coast, doing everything from sales and marketing to product design and so forth. So a wonderful 5 years. And after that, I briefly had my own consulting company, and one of my clients ended up being another health plan that served about 2 million federal employees in the dental and medical space. And lo and behold, as I was consulting there, the opportunity came up for the chief operating officer position for that company. And it was an opportunity that I couldn't resist, and really look forward to getting back to the health plan operations, which was kind of my background from early on. So given that wonderful opportunity, again, it was a company that was 80 plus years old and been doing a lot of really great things from a growth standpoint and serving a niche market, members coast to coast, again, about 2 million in the dental and medical plans. And about a year into that, I was actually given a greater opportunity to become CEO of that company. So that is probably what I'll focus mostly on today when you ask some questions, but it gave me a great opportunity to not only see the ground floor operations, but also transition from a COO role into a CEO role, which was a privilege and definitely different roles, and I enjoyed them both, and I think we'll get into some of that as we go on. So
Excellent.
that's my background.
Yeah, that's a great perspective too, because you were in the operations side and then you kind of oversaw it all, which leads me to my first question. Really, is a healthcare plan, a payer in the U.S. There's so many moving parts. There's so many elements. You've got your members, you've got your physician providers, and then you've got your employees, and there's just a lot of complexity there. So, with that many constituents, how did you figure out how to balance all those things? Because they sometimes compete with one another in the mind space, but they're all important, equally important.
Well, I think what you're mentioning is one of the greatest opportunities that almost any healthcare company, at least health plans that I've been directly inside of as well as consulted with, which is integration. Integration is key and really is a requirement for survival now. Probably not so much if you set back the clock 20, 25 years ago. And the reason I really reference it, the two companies that I've been with the longest have been around for 80, 85 years, is there's a lot of what I would call siloed thinking as you find companies like that. And it's not unique to the companies that I work for. It could be a brand new startup that has silos the next day, because I consider this more of a cultural battle than it is process or technology. So, I found myself, again, I'll focus most of my responses on my most recent corporate experience where I was a COO and then the CEO, and really found myself as COO of a company of about 1,500 employees that had been around a long time, serving in a niche market, 2 million members, but really a lot of silos. The company was operating very efficiently. Every one of the 1,500 employees understood the purpose was to serve the members. So there was a lot of great things. It was a very wonderful environment, great people, but very clearly, even though they all knew the mission, which actually wasn't the mission posted on the wall, but the mission to serve employees was there, something you can't create overnight. So the foundation was really great, but they were operating in a lot of silos. And literally, you mentioned some of the constituents, whether it be provider, employee, member, and so forth, but I'll throw also in their vendors. I think there was, hundreds of different vendors that we were having to integrate and so forth. So it was really, again, siloed. And the challenge I think that we wanted to overcome is, how do you make this siloed organization more integrated and actually simplify a lot of things that were going on, so that you could kind of go slow in the beginning to go faster in the end, and move forward into a world that actually is changing more rapidly each and every day than it is now.
Yeah.
So I think that was our main obstacle.
Yeah, I think that word simplification is something a lot of companies lose sometimes. They not because they mean to, but they just build in so many different processes or things that then they lose sight of that. But the economy right now is getting a little complex, and you've got both individuals and companies looking at alternatives. You're seeing inflation, you're seeing high prices, you're seeing unfortunately some layoffs, and gosh, everybody's probably worried about their 401k in the U.S. right now. So there's all these elements. So when you were CEO of an organization that big, what was your strategy or tactics to say, hey, everything's going to be okay, we're here for you, we're going to get through this together, kind of thing?
And I think our key to success in that realm was what we did before it happened, before the pandemic happened, before the economic downturn. And it was great timing for us. And I don't know that we meant for it to be great timing, but we actually did a tremendous amount of work on mission, vision, and values before this happened. We addressed things like diversity, equity, and inclusion up front, and so forth. And really, something I'll never regret. It's not something that I did as a COO, because at that point I was more focused on getting an ERP system in place, and a lot more of the, how do you clean up maybe the process and the technology. As I mentioned, as CEO, the company had such a great foundation of values, but those values really needed to be refreshed. The mission needed to be refreshed. The vision needed to be refreshed. And when I say that, simplification really comes in mind. I could not repeat what the mission was when I got there, because it was 2 or 3 very long sentences. And so we went through a process and created a very simple mission statement of what we stand for, and it was very short. Everybody could remember it and state it. We created a vision statement that is really kind of a little bit longer, but outlined what we wanted to strive to be as a company in 5-10 years into the future.
Yep.
And most importantly, we reestablished what our values were. I think most any company these days have values that are posted on the wall or they created or whatever. And I would really encourage companies to live those values. In fact, we had a program after we got them finished it was the LOVE program, which stood for Live Our Values Every Day. And that was really, again, ahead of the economic or the pandemic issues that faced us all.
Yeah.
By really establishing those and not just creating them and putting them on a shelf or a poster on the wall. We integrated everything we did from communication to decision making by referencing those values, by referencing that mission. And I cannot underestimate, or you can never overestimate, the value of communication. And I was always a very analytic thinker and thinking, wow, I've communicated this once, that's enough. And really, it's really basic stuff. And what we did, I think we did very well. I had some great team around me to help with this, because I think communication is a lot of times something, myself, even as somebody who procrastinates quite a bit, you don't always get to the communication. So we had a great team that could work together, made sure that there was a tone from the top, a CEO communication that was pushed out every 2 weeks, regardless of what was going on. And it wasn't just about what was going on. That's fine, but tell them what, more importantly, tell them why. Yeah. Link it back to the mission, link it back to the values, the do's and the don'ts that we expect people to follow and behave by. And repeat. If you think you've told somebody once, that's fine, but it really takes a lot of repetition to get that going. So that was really the first component and the foundation, the exciting part. And again, the company was really in good shape already from that perspective, because the core values were there. We just needed to articulate them, simplify them, and get everybody on board with what that really meant.
Yeah, interesting. So let's stay on this employee engagement side of things a little bit, because when I see a health plan, we hear about it all the time. You've got these peaks and valleys of work, right? You've got open enrollment is well known as a very busy time for payers, and then you may have just a higher claims volume coming in December because of people wanting to use up their deductible, or if they've already hit their deductible, they want to get through other procedures. So what was your strategy to balance that? I mean, because if you have one of those peaks or you have one of those valleys, how did you plan for that?
Well, it is a problem and an opportunity for that seasonal type of work that's inherited at a health plan that you have to overcome. And really, I'll take it back to a couple of our values at that time was one team and a growth mentality. So 2 examples I would give, and you actually already mentioned them. In the fall, there was an open season where we would take on 90% of our new enrollment, and we were covering basically every zip code in the United States as far as sales and marketing. And you can't employ a full sales force 12 months a year to cover the United States when your sales period is really a 4 to 5 week period. So we would actually train hundreds of employees in the organization to step out of their current role for a couple of weeks and go out and become sales representatives, across the nation to sit at the booths and explain our benefit plans and so forth. And people really actually, that was happening long before I got to the company, but I always thought that was a really key ingredient and something that was really important when a customer service representative or a claims representative or somebody in facilities or some, that was kind of that one team mentality. And everybody was proud of the company and how we serve those members. So that was one way there. The other side you mentioned is, when you get all that new enrollment and January comes around, and guess what happens? You get, pandemics and flu season and so forth. And, a lot of that, we did that, a couple of different ways, kind of that one team mentality where obviously the operations areas were cross-trained between customer service as well as claims, but also, working with some of our vendors I referenced before, which is to have that overflow capability,
Yeah.
which is an interesting cultural thing. If you start looking at working with outsourced vendors to do things, it kind of gets back to communication. So that's fine to have that as a backup plan. But what happens if you don't wrap the right communication around something like that is you have this wonderful thing called the grapevine at these companies. And all of a sudden, wow, if they're outsourcing this overflow work, what am I going to lose my job next year because this is more efficient? And so I'm not here to say we actually did make some very difficult decisions about outsourcing some things that most companies had outsourced 10, 15 years earlier. And you just have to do that to stay competitive. But at the end of the day, if you don't get back to that communication and what you're doing, and more importantly, the why we're doing it, I guess don't let people kind of create their own version of the truth, because I think that's very damaging to a company. And again, sometimes the news isn't good. Sometimes the news might be exactly what they're thinking, but at least if you tell them that and are authentic about it and treat them like humans and adults and kind of move forward, I can tell you that it's a much easier path to take. It's not always I kind of learned along the way that if the worse the news is, the more you need to be face to face and visible. So we would do a lot of communications written throughout the year, but if it's something that was that might be taken negatively, that's when we actually said, you know what, this needs to be a video or in person. So we would actually lean into the type of communication we had to do and try to make it more face to face, eye to eye if it was bad news versus was good, and not hide from it. And that made a bigger difference than I could ever imagine.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when we think about if we think about the employees, you've got everybody always has those star performers. You kind of have low performers, and then you have everybody else in the middle. From a strategy perspective, I know everyone mattered, but how do you manage kind of that expectation to make sure you keep the rock stars, but you also want to develop others, right?
Yeah, and that's a challenge I think every company has, and you mentioned engagement earlier, and for many years now I've really used and I know there's a lot of different engagement surveys out there. I've actually just kind of enjoyed the Gallup survey that is out there. It's a 12-question survey, so it's not a lengthy survey, and it kind of gives you everything you need to know as far as how to tackle engagement and keeping people involved in your company and moving forward. And it's asking questions like, do they know what's expected? Do they have the right tools, all the way to are they proud to work towards the mission? Do they understand their work and how it connects to the mission? Do they understand the strategy of the company? And we really in my last corporate role as COO and CEO, that was the opportunity I had with a large group of people, 1,500 people, to really deploy that through the enterprise. I'd done it departmental and things like that before, but we were able to use that as a foundational tool to not only, as you said, kind of deal with our talent, but move the needle on engagement. The baseline, first time we took that, we were at the 31st percentile of engagement. I mentioned those silos and things like that before, so not everybody really felt connected. And 2 years later, which was the third time we took the survey, we had moved to the 86th percentile on the Gallup scale. So I was really proud of that. And I think the word proud is something too that overflows to every employee in the company. And if you can get people kind of in the game, right, not disengaged, and move forward. So one of the biggest gaps we found in that exercise, the survey, the data, was that we had a really highly engaged executive team because everything was new and fresh, and we had a new team, and we were able to create a new mission, vision, value. So there was a lot of excitement and engagement at the top 12 to 20 people in the company. We had pretty decent engagement levels at individual contributor level throughout the company. Our biggest gap in engagement was kind of the middle management layer, which is catastrophic when you think about it, because it's like, oh, we could be at the executive level and I'll be, singing the same tune and everything and thinking we're doing the right job and cascading communication. And there's this huge gap in the middle. And so we saw that as the biggest opportunity for improving our engagement, because that group is the glue that holds everything together between where the work is done and the decisions are made at the executive level. So So we really honed in, and it's not the same answer for every department, for every,
Right.
so we use that data to not be punitive at all, but like, where's our opportunities? Where's our biggest opportunity for getting people in the game and getting them engaged? And that's, we put a lot of corporate objectives around improving those engagement scores, as opposed to satisfaction. Engagement is very different than satisfaction. Satisfaction, I believe, comes later as you engage and get people really understanding what this company is all about and being proud of it and wanting to come to work every day, and doing a lot of things to not only do that piece, but just, circling back to your other question about how employees feel during an economic downturn or during a pandemic. People are spending a huge amount of their life at work.
Yeah.
Right. So if they feel like that's a place where they can engage and they can feel safe and they can, really participate in that, and not be like, that's the drag, that all of this other stuff is impacting them personally. Maybe their spouse was laid off during there's so many different things going on outside of work, but they're spending a huge amount of time. So the safer and more encouraging you can make the workplace, I think the greater impact from a positive standpoint you have on their lives in total. And I know they really appreciate that. And again, sometimes the news isn't always that great, but authentic, genuine, frequent and concise communication really helps resolve that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my last two questions on this, I think that middle management layer that you talked about, I think that's an interesting opportunity and challenge. The other is kind of the notion of balancing performance and well-being. So maybe we start with that one. So through the pandemic, our technology can provide data that shows what people are doing, what they're working on, how much output they had, and things like that, which can be conceived as big brotherish, right? But there's something about that transparency layer that allows the employees to be richer in what they're doing, as well as the managers. But to tie it back to your question, that middle management, if they interpret that data poorly, you have a big problem, right?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that might be the group of employees within the company that a lot of times are most ill-equipped. A lot of times managers became managers because they were good at their job, and maybe they didn't have the best training, or maybe they didn't really want to be a manager, but there wasn't a good career path otherwise. So there's a lot of different reasons people become managers or are managers and so forth. But again, I think that might be one of your biggest opportunities, especially with the tools that ActiveOps have, which are incredible tools as far as monitoring that efficiency and performance. And I completely agree. And I know you and I have talked about this a lot already in the past, which is these can't be punitive in nature. It has to be data for, either the managers or the employees themselves to actually, it shines a light on the opportunity for innovation at the desk level, for managers to actually say, you know what, this person's highly productive, but they don't necessarily work the same way this other person works. What's going on there? Can they learn from each other?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the things I talked about in the beginning of our podcast here actually fits that. I always, I think I've learned more and more as I've gone along. If you don't address the cultural issues up front and try to fix something with technology or process, I think you have a less likelihood for success. And so it's not always, again, about the solution, because there's a tremendous number of great solutions out there. But if you don't manage for the change and the culture, again, I think the success rate is diminished dramatically.
Yeah, it's good advice too. Thank you for that. It's an interesting perspective because we've got new opportunities and new challenges that are ahead of us, right? So remote working is good for a lot of people. It's maybe bad for others, and enabling an organization to say, well, what's right for the employee, what's right for the company, and finding that balance is really a challenge. So that's awesome. Well, Darren, if somebody wanted to pick up the conversation with you after listening here, how best to find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so that's probably a great way to do it. And also, I don't know, Michael, if you feel free to share my contact information with anybody who'd like to talk. I again have been doing this in some fashion or another for about 30 years, and I enjoy the healthcare space. And And I think I equally enjoy the culture and people space as much. And I think a lot of that is applicable beyond, across all industries. So I think as my career progressed and I moved into that CEO spot, I really relish and enjoy the aspect of building teams and kind of just using the lessons that I've learned over the years to help companies move forward in a more positive manner.
And that's great. And that experience can certainly help, new managers coming up too. We're seeing a whole generation of course we are, but we see a generation of different types of workers coming into the marketplace. So that's great. Well, thank you very much, Darren. And for everybody watching or listening on this podcast, we encourage you to go to our AOTV channel on YouTube. You can look up more episodes of this podcast. You can also see other videos, or you can go to ActiveOps.com. And one important element that will flash up here after this is a QR code. We've recently done a study with over 1,000 senior leaders around the globe and what they see and what they are anticipating during the recession. So it's an informative, expert-driven research paper, and it's a free download. So feel free to go click on the QR code and make that happen. So, Darren, thanks again for joining. Everybody, have a great day.